right.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amy Alsup. I'm an adjunct professor in sociology. And today I'm going to talk to you about a couple strategies that have honestly just really transformed my classroom space and sort of changed my whole perspective on teaching. These are concepts of radical listening and engaged pedagogy. And so first, I'd like to do just some brief introductions so I can get to know you a bit. And I'll introduce myself, give you a little context on who I am. And then from there, I'll introduce these concepts. And then this will be an interactive workshop where we'll do sort of a Jamboard activity where you're going to look at an excerpt about engaged pedagogy, and you'll watch a media clip about radical listening. And you'll get to do a little bit of breakout session work talking about these concepts. And then we'll go back to the small, large group setting to talk and wrap things up. So again, thank you so much for being here. So we'll get started. So today's agenda is just going to be, first off, to do our introductions. I'll introduce you to the concept of engaged pedagogy. We'll do a Jamboard activity based around this concept. And then I'll introduce you to the concept of radical listening. And we'll watch a media clip about that. And then at that time, you'll go into your breakout groups to talk about the video. And then we'll come back to our large group and do a bit of a wrap up. So just a tiny bit about me. My name is Amy Alsup. My pronouns are she, her. This is my email. If you would like to contact me after this discussion, please feel free. I'm happy to give you any resources I have about engaged pedagogy and radical listening. I teach sociology, as I mentioned, so part of the topics I'm passionate about are gender and race. I'm passionate about looking into injustices in these areas and how we can resolve these inequities. And my background is in studying social movements and various social justice issues, as well as revolutions. And my hobbies are collecting vinyl records, traveling, and hiking. And I just got a new puppy, so I've been spending a lot of time with her and losing a little bit of sleep, but I'm really, really happy to be here today and excited to get to know you all. So what I'd like you to do, we can do popcorn style. Just introduce yourself, and if you're comfortable sharing, you can tell me your pronouns. Then you can talk about what discipline you teach. Feel free to add in any hobbies that you'd like to share, just like I did. But I thought a good question for this time of the semester would be, what do you plan to do during spring break? If you have any time at all to relax or practice a bit of self-care, because this is something I've been thinking a lot about during this time. So would anyone like to start us off?
I will.
Okay.
So I'm Laura Gonzalez, and I teach anthropology. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm really hoping to connect with nature in maybe one or more ways over spring break. Thinking about potentially hiking or maybe a couple of different ways to connect. I really miss swimming. I feel like I need to swim. So that's me. So would you like me to popcorn it to someone?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. How about Najah?
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Najah Abdelkader, and I identify myself as she, her, hers pronouns. I teach philosophy and humanities, and one way that I plan to relax, I think going for walks. That's just so so good for me, I usually go to Lake Miramar or any of the lakes in my neighborhood, Lake Murray. Just being around water is magical, and we are so blessed with this beautiful nature around us. I really would love to go to Anza Borrego or just go for a drive and disconnect from all the hustle and bustle. So, and sleep a lot maybe once I finish my duties and my tasks. But I'm so happy to be with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Najah. Do you mind popcorning it to someone else?
Absolutely. I'll popcorn it to Pablo Martin.
Hi, everybody. Let's see. Questions. Well, Pablo Martin, that's my name. Teaching communication sustainability is my game, and my pronouns are he, his, him. And one way I'm going to plan to relax and practice self-care. We're going camping in Big Sur next week, so I plan to chill and to try not to grade too much, because I can't avoid grading at least some. But I will popcorn to, let's see, Cynthia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Cheng. I actually have to leave in about 5 minutes, but I'll introduce myself and I'll watch the recording afterwards. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I teach chemistry, organic chemistry, which what I love to teach. Next week, unfortunately, I have to teach at other campuses, so I only have half spring break for myself, but in terms for relaxation, I usually run or go to the gym and talk to my gym buddies and get a different perspective of life for my mental health. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would popcorn it to Elaine.
Hi, my name's Elaine Eng. My pronouns are she, her, hers. My discipline is nursing. And one way that I plan to relax over this break is to go hiking, as well as to go travel to visit my family back on the East Coast.
Excellent. And then I think it's just Laura, I believe.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura. I teach sociology, and my pronouns are she, her, and I would like to do some organizing over spring break. I find that very relaxing.
I agree. Honestly, that is usually the first step for me to be able to fully relax, and kind of getting into that mode helps so much. So thank you, everybody. I'm glad to get to know you and kind of establish that community vibe before we get started here. So we can dive in. So I want to just start with an introduction to engaged pedagogy and the person who created this concept, who is Bell Hooks. So really what I try to do from day one in my classes, I've, not done this since the beginning of my teaching, but it's something that I've come to embrace over time as I've sort of learned what works best in my classroom. And to build community, I really found a lot of inspiration in Bell Hooks's idea of engaged pedagogy. And what this is, well, first I'll introduce Bell Hooks. She was a Black feminist educator who sadly passed away in December of last year. But she promoted the idea in her writing that, every student has a valuable contribution to make to the learning process. And she mentions that we learn best when there's an interactive relationship between student and teacher. And so I don't know about any of you, but when I first began my teaching journey, I was very lecture oriented. And I still, like to lecture a bit in my classes. But over time, my classes have become a lot more discussion oriented. And I really value what that's done to my classroom community. I think it's really established this special space where we can all, promote each other's humanity, where we can learn together most effectively. And there's just been a lot of power in this practice. So I'd like to, introduce you to this concept and then have you talk about it a little bit more. So some of the major features that are part of engaged pedagogy are promoting emotional awareness in the classroom. So as an instructor, just being aware of, each student's emotional state, each student's emotional presence, and kind of teaching students to be aware of the emotional tone in the room at all times. As I mentioned before, it's really about interactive relationships over, a teacher who's lecturing and not doing any discussion. It's all about fostering student hopes and dreams. So sort of seeing the student as a whole person and not just a member of your classroom, but a person who, goes out into the world every day and has aspirations and has goals. It's about establishing student trust. So that trusting relationship between instructor and student and between classmates, promoting vulnerability and openness, mutual participation, independent thinking. And it's also about honoring all capabilities, not solely the ability to speak, but also active listening. So in an excerpt from her book, Teaching Critical Thinking, Bell Hooks talks a lot about how, a lot of professors are really interested in the idea of fairness. And they think that if they give each student an equal amount of time to talk, then somehow that's promoting equity in the classroom more than anything else. But not all students, I don't believe, have that same desire. And so sometimes it's about honoring students' active listening as much as it's about honoring what they say in the classroom. So that's one thing I've really gained from this approach. It's also about a cooperative learning space and kind of creating passion for knowledge. And it's also promoting the self-development and self-actualization of students. So these are kind of the main components that I've gathered about this pedagogical approach. And so what I'd like you to do now is I have a Jamboard activity where I have excerpts from Bell Hooks's book. And this excerpt is all about engaged pedagogy. So what you'll do is just sort of as a large group, kind of independently, I'll have you go over this piece. And then you can use the Jamboard to highlight any passages that really speak to you. You can add notes or comments on the sidelines. And then after a few minutes, we can sort of share with one another the quotes from the reading that spoke to us most. So I think through engaged pedagogy, we can all do our part in the classroom to be fully engaged, to actively listen to each other, to find meaning in the classroom space. When we all take risks, we can participate mutually in the work of creating a learning community, and we discover together that we can be vulnerable in the space of shared learning. So I'll go ahead and open up the Jamboard. So as I do, I'll share this link in the chat and you can pull out any quotes, or Laura is ahead of the game. She shared the link with you. Thank you, Laura. You can go ahead and, share any quotes, highlight any ideas that speak to you, and then think about some practical ways you can implement those strategies in the classroom. So I'll give you a few minutes here and I'll take a look at the Jamboard and then we'll kind of talk about what spoke to us. And just to let everyone know, there's a few pages of this. So I think it's 4 pages. No need to read every single line, but if you want to skip ahead and find other passages that speak to you, feel free to do so.
Shit. Fuck. What we.
I'm seeing a lot of good feedback so far. I'll maybe give another 5 minutes or so. All right, so maybe we can wrap up here next minute. As you're kind of finalizing your thoughts, would anyone like to share a passage or an idea that spoke to them while reading this piece? I really enjoyed a lot of the comments I saw. This question in the beginning of, how we assess emotional awareness, I think is an important one. I think this happens over time. It's probably not easy, to establish this on day one, but it's kind of a semester-long quest, I think, to get to know students. And as we do, to sort of engage with them on whatever level they want to be engaged with. So I think it's about forming those individual relationships and really connecting, again, just on the human level. So that's kind of what I got from that. But what do other people think?
I was desperately trying to get to my mic button a few moments ago. It took me forever, so sorry. I'm going to be in my car listening in, so unable to participate as much. But I just got off the phone with a student who's a Black student from Africa who transferred from here to CSU San Marcos and went to a program that is not engaged pedagogy, to say the least. And she does not feel valued as a person. There's no room for, really, it feels like, for her to be and disagree and have opinions and be a person in there. It seems like she's being treated like, this is what we study. And so, kind of like, shut up and play along. And it's shocking to me at a university of caliber of CSU San Marcos, which I generally hear such great things about. And I just thought, like, boy, she would be so happy if her faculty really did this and really took time and really treated everyone as if they mattered. And, it's just, she feels silent so much. And it's just like what an enriching experience we offer our students when we really focus on each individual and not getting through the material, So I've always loved bell hooks. This is great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's a really powerful example of how, a student really is only going to benefit from a given classroom experience if they're valued in that space. And so one of the things I really like in this piece is how bell hooks talks about how when she first started her work as an educator, she had that same feeling that so many of us have the, this pressure to get through the material. There's certain concepts we really need to cover. So it's understandable that professors feel that way and that they maybe feel disheartened when they don't get through everything, because there's that sense of, all of this is so important. We need to talk about all of it. But I think the more I've let that go and embraced sort of this idea that ultimately none of that matters if my students don't feel valued in this space, that's really allowed me to create more community and just sort of embrace people where they're at, get to know them, and understand my students better. Najah?
Yes, Amy, thank you so much. This is very beautiful. We are learning how to teach on the spot, and we continuously learn from each other, tweaking tricks, certain dynamics, strategies in the classroom. So I really appreciate that. And also, there is so much that pressure on us, like you said, it's quantity. Am I gonna finish the chapter? Okay, Japanese civilization in an hour and 35 minutes, and then you want me to do active listening and engage pedagogy. What the f is that? And then we think, oh, am I engaging? Which community in the classroom am I engaging, and not shorting the time of the other groups of students. It's always an act of balance but I think I like what one of the dynamics that Bell Hooks talks about is that reading for one another, it immediately generate a safe space, we would hope, among the student community in the classroom, either pair or groups of three, and then allowing them to write on this on their own, and then later hopefully sharing it with the class. I like this idea of reading to one another, right? Trusting their space and their pace of reading. Thank you.
Laura?
So I wanted to share something that has happened to me this semester that is like the reading was really resonating on, about, for, what's the preposition? I don't know. But this semester I have one on-campus class, and I decided to, on the suggestion of a friend, I decided to create a completely flexible class so that people could do all of the work online if they wanted to, but they could also come to class if they wanted to. And if they came to class, then they could make up the points for the discussion board and several other things, so that no matter what you did, you didn't have to feel guilty or like you weren't successful. And so what's happened is I've got about 7 really enthusiastic students who love to talk about anthropology. And I know that I've sort of created like the ideal environment. And it's not always going to be that way, because of course we do want to reach everyone. And I hope that my online environment also is reaching everyone, because I try to be very present there as well, and to have them create community among each other. But we don't, like, I barely talk in that class, and it's so liberating just to say, like, here's some things we're going to talk about today. Here's your groups. Let's figure it out. Let's do something, and doing things that are authentic. It's so motivating. For instance, yesterday we were working on economics, and we funded 2 microloans through Kiva, and I had the students investigate what microloans were, and I have a Miramar class set up an account so that periodically my class gets their loans paid back, and then we can loan out money again. It's only $25, and we just reloan it. And so they learned about like gender and different sectors and who benefits most from microfinance. And I don't know, it's just like, it's been so amazing. I was so nervous to come back to the classroom. But I find that talking less in the classroom, me talking less, is so much better. And just guiding and allowing them to talk more. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. And the reading really, it's like really resonating with me.
Good. I'm so glad. And thank you both, Najah and Laura, for sharing kind of your impressions, because I agree with Najah that that reading aloud practice can be so powerful. And I agree with Laura that that liberating feeling of just sort of almost putting things in the hands of students not only makes the classroom space so transformative and inspiring and exciting, but it also sort of takes that burden off your shoulder as an instructor, because you're just letting the class go where it's supposed to go, in a way where you're not so much the director or the leader as the facilitator. And there's not, that's not to say that there's not a time and space for, a lecture or for more of a directed discussion. There may very well be time and space for that. But I think that letting go and that unleashing kind kind of relinquishing a little bit of control so that students can feel empowered is just such an amazing thing. Anyone else?
Oops, you're muted, Amy.
Thank you. So I'm just taking a quick look again at the notes, and I see a lot of really wonderful ideas highlighted, and a lot of aha moments and some questions. And so it sounds like this reading inspired kind of a lot of contemplation about our teaching strategies. Just in case anyone wanted to add, did anyone else want to add before we jump to another topic?
I did want to ask if anyone has any insight about that line about students being able to voice their resistance to thinking. Like, well, not sure what that means.
Yeah, I saw that question in there. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. Which page was that?
I usually get frustrated when students voice their resistance to thinking.
Right. This is on page 2, and it's underlined in sort of the pink red.
Okay.
I looked at that a couple times, and the way I read that was, I guess, students being willing to acknowledge either in a reading or with a classmate when maybe they don't see eye to eye with, I don't know, a viewpoint from the status quo. I'm not quite sure, but that's sort of what I was wondering if maybe it meant. So voice their.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say maybe not thinking in general, but voice their
Right.
resistance to a certain line of thought maybe is what is being said.
That's what I wondered, but it is a good question because I'm not sure if I'm interpreting that as she meant it or not. But knowing kind of her approach, that's what I'm wondering if maybe when she's talking about voicing resistance, maybe she's talking about voicing resistance to structures of power or like paradigms that are kind of dominant, but I'm not sure. It's a good question.
That makes much more sense. I think I wasn't thinking about it in those ways, but yeah, that makes sense.
Any other thoughts before we go forward? I'll go ahead and share my screen again here. Okay. One moment. All right. So we can move to the next concept in this last little bit of time, but another strategy that I like to implement is radical listening. This is another powerful tool to create community, and the term is attributed to a professor of education at Quebec University. His name was Joe L. Kinchloe. But I think, there's a lot of people who use this practice and encourage this practice, outside of academia. He's by no means the first person to think this way. But really, he was urging his students and colleagues to tune into each other's voices without projecting one's own ideas and identity into the conversation. So this practice is sometimes described as rhetorical or deep listening. And often it's talked about as an anti-racist practice that we can use in the classroom. So promoting this is a way to disrupt, power relationships. It's a way for people in marginalized groups to kind of gain a voice in the classroom and to share their experiences in maybe more of an approachable setting. So the way it works is, it's really all about paying attention to how you're listening, quieting your brain, resisting the instinct to respond with your own thoughts. A method of listening where you practice pausing, and when the speaker's done, repeat what you heard to ensure you didn't misunderstand. And I think this is particularly useful in polarizing conversations, conversations about politics, for example. Another quote I like about radical listening is that it begins to soften the hard, unyielding ground that has arisen between us. It's a way to confront political divisiveness and ideological divides. And this is from a TED Talk where the speaker, emphasizes that through radical listening, you can still fight for what you believe in, but you don't fight the person. You counter the views, and only at the right moment, when you've fully kind of taken in what that person has to say. So I recommend this TED Talk if you get the chance. I'll be sure to share my slides so that you can access that.
Yes.
But just a couple more notes. I guess in the last little bit of time, I thought we could watch this clip. Originally, I was thinking we could do breakout rooms, but since we have such a small group, maybe we can watch this together and then just kind of wrap up by talking about it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, and then you can share your thoughts. Let me know right away if you can't hear.
It was a Maine summer day, and I spent it wandering the humid aisles of the Brunswick Indoor Flea Market. With my camera in hand, I searched for interesting objects and subjects to capture, hoping to strike Instagram gold. Seeing nothing that was worth paying attention to, I decided to move along. And just as I was about to pick up my pace, I heard a voice ask, "What are you taking pictures of?" I turned toward the voice to see two white men in their 70s perched in a cluttered booth filled with old fishing equipment and boxes of papers. Let's call them Jim and Ray. "Just stuff I see," I said. They welcomed me into their space, and there we were. We talked about Maine and how traditional industries are changing. And that's when Jim said, "It's the computers. They're taking our jobs. Trump's gonna bring them back, though." "No, he's not," I yelled in my head. As much as I wanted to correct Jim, over a year ago, I decided I would engage in a new practice. And no, it wasn't the latest yoga trend. It's radical listening. Radical listening is the practice of intentionally quieting your internal voice and judgments, thereby offering your full mental space to the speaker. This practice allows me to ask more informed questions, receive well thought out answers, and enable worthwhile conversations, sometimes. And think about it. Whether it was last year's election or the last conversation with your partner about their socks becoming an art installation on your apartment floor, we are terrible at listening to people we disagree with. It's a defense mechanism, an element of our brain that's been evolving over millions of years to protect us when we feel most vulnerable and are at risk of being wrong. However, I believe that being listened to and understood are ways in which we affirm each other's existence. And when people feel that they are left out or ignored, we experience doubt and extremism in our society, our communities, our politics, and our relationships. Now, I think we've forgotten that every conversation doesn't have to end with someone joining your side. We don't all need to be on the same team here. And even more, I'm not sure we taught, or maybe we forgot along the way, how to disagree respectfully. Radical listening is not easy or simple at all. It's a constant practice and reminder to self to suspend what I presume to know about someone and their experience in our shared society. Back in the booth at the flea market, I practiced, I reminded, I listened, and I also struggled a lot. When Ray said that Hillary Clinton was the Antichrist, I really struggled with that. And in that moment, I reminded, and I practiced, and I listened. And it wasn't the easiest conversation that I've ever had, but we were there, sticking to it. Then, as in today, radical listening is necessary work that doesn't necessarily get easier. Ask anyone who knows me. I have a very hard time not correcting people when they're wrong. I mean, really hard. However, what I know won't always change someone's mind, beliefs, and opinions. And if I approach every conversation with the intent to proselytize, I'm gonna burn out. So, if I can shift my approach, rethink my expectations, and preserve some of my energy, perhaps I can engage in conversations that end with more empathy, compassion, and understanding. Perhaps even I can model this practice for someone who's hesitant. And that's because radical listening is a necessary step to effecting change. In order to change our society, I need to know how someone on the other side thinks. To have a successful relationship, I need to try to understand my partner. To have a successful society, I need to try to understand those two men at the flea market. And they need to try to understand me too. It goes both ways. Back in the booth at the flea market, our conversation was winding down. I had my camera in hand and I was ready to move along. They thanked me for listening, told me to read Breitbart, and Ray went on to say that he believed America to be a country of laws. You know when Scooby-Doo goes, bro? That was me. But I practiced and reminded and listened. Ray went on to say that those laws extend even to law enforcement that use excessive and deadly force against Black people instead of protecting and serving them. Wow, I thought. A moment I didn't expect. And that's what happens when we listen radically. We have the opportunity to listen to and learn from people, even those that seem so different from us. And it's in that listening that we begin the process of radical change. And even more, what this practice has taught me, and I hope will teach you, is how to become more comfortable being uncomfortable. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Let me go back to my slides here. So any thoughts, reactions that you wanted to share? Basically, when I think of radical listening, I think that it's an important tool for me as an instructor when I'm engaging with students and listening to their views. But I also actually have my students watch this video and we talk about radical listening on day one. And I tend to remind them about this practice throughout the semester. And it's just sort of an easy way to redirect any discussions that get off course or that become divisive. So does anyone want to share their impressions or thoughts? Some of the questions I had for the breakout sessions were, what spoke to you about this clip? To you, what is radical listening? And do you think it's useful in your classroom? And how would you implement it?
I can jump in, Amy.
Sure.
I really liked the clip. I think this is maybe one of the hardest things for humans to do. I have such great respect for people who can do this kind of listening. I'm not sure I'm good at it because I tend to avoid it.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that in the classroom, like you said, having students understand that the point of listening is not to rebut, it's not to come up with a reason to argue back or to start formulating your words before you've heard the rest of someone's idea, but it's really to listen. And then I like the idea of sort of like reporting it back in an objective way to make sure that you've understood. That can be like a really powerful tool, I think, in the classroom, especially when we talk about things that are divisive. And in our colleague meetings as well, our public practices with our colleagues, being able to radically listen and not put up those defenses right away in larger spaces, I think is it's a very hard thing, but something that I'm interested in doing better. So like as a person and as a teacher.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I think it's a constant reminder for myself, and I know I'm not good at it. Maybe a little bit better at this in my classroom than I am in my daily life, perhaps, but it's just a constant work in progress. Absolutely. Najat, did you have a comment or question?
I agree with Laura. I loved this clip. I would love to show it to everyone.
Yeah.
Circle. And being teachers, we feel sometimes pressured. We have to come up with gems, and answers all the time. Like I am gonna save the day and
Right.
my light for humanity, for the classroom. But sometimes students ask a question and I find myself already blurting, oh, blah 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 blah, and I sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm really just not. So I sometimes take a cup of coffee and take a sip as a student is asking, just to calm myself and wait till the student finishes what they have to say without me jumping and adding and clarifying. And just like you said, active listening is also about pauses in between that allow us to reflect, which is a good reminder for me, because I might seem to you calm but in the classroom I'm a chatterbox and I want to la 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 la, and that's not anyway, that's not always the best. I talk too much sometimes.
Thank you, Najah. Yeah, I agree. I think especially, when a student says something that is not supported by research or that could offend or alienate someone, I think it's so hard not to step in immediately. But I've found that pause, like you mentioned, is just so important. And I love this idea to, take a sip of coffee, even divert sometimes the room if a large group conversation is getting polarizing in some way, to just kind of remind students back about this idea of radical listening and maybe do small groups to change things up. But there's so many strategies we can implement on the fly when this isn't working. So I think we're just about out of time, but before we go, does anyone want to add any final thoughts about either engaged pedagogy or radical listening?
It's andragogy or whatever, no longer a pedagogy. I just was reminded, pedagogy, don't use that word anymore. So what is that? Oh my gosh. Like,
sometimes I struggle to say the word. Just want to say how we teach.
Like
absolutely.
Job description, tell us about andragogy. Oh, pedagogy. Oh my gosh, no, we are not teaching children. Oh boy.
Right.
You're not shy. You're like, I don't have two wives. What?
Yeah.
Polygyny? What? No.
What? I don't have two wives yet. I got it. Finally got it.
Anyway, Amy, I want to say thank you so much for this. It's really given me a lot to think about. I wrote a ton of notes.
Good.
Yeah, it's, I think, really important to remember these things. And now I'm going to go buy another Bell Hooks book.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'll put in the chat the link to this YouTube clip by Chanel Lewis so that you can peruse that later. Yeah, I'm happy to share my PowerPoint. You can access the recording, and thank you all for just a wonderful discussion. I just really appreciate it.
This is very lovely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Take
Amy.
care. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.